head. Perspective, of course, is personal, but I think once we address perspective, we start to learn things about ourselves that help at least to give us clues to the why me question. Here was my first ever hugest moment of enlightenment. Now this is a cheap one, but I gotta be honest, it was a good one. August 23rd, 1985, 10:53 in the morning. Exactly. I'll never forget watching my son being born. Wow. Is that a moment? They say it's a beautiful moment. I would disagree, but it is a moment. It's not a pretty sight, is it, really? They're kind of gooey when they're born. But they clean him up and they put him in my case a blue blanket. My son was born. He's fine, by the way. I get a lot of people ask that question. I've actually had people say, does he have arms? Honest, yes, he's fine. Suffering a little bit from personal motivation, which is sort of ironic, but anyway. Here's a good one. Sorry, I gotta mention this one too, because I can't, you know, these are thoughts that sometimes people ask me later, and then I have to remember to ask them during the session so that we can cover this. He gets asked this question all the time. What's it like having a dad without arms? Good question. Great answer. He says, what, like I got to pick? Isn't that a good answer? Here's what that answer taught me. Did I pick this? No, we don't get to pick. Did you ever notice that? We don't get to pick how we're born. We don't get to pick the color of our hair. Well, sort of. We don't get to pick how our body's shaped. We don't get to pick a lot of these things. Is this not an obvious cliche? But it occurs to me, we do get to pick our attitude. Attitude is not a pre-designed idea. It is something that can transform us, as is rather obvious. But here's what kills me. I get paid obscene amounts of money. I gotta tell you, truthful, to tell people things like, it's better to have a positive attitude than a negative one. I mean, duh! Everybody knows that. It's a little more complicated than that. But as it turns out, attitude is a huge thing, is it not? I think it is. Again, August 23rd, 1985 taught me a ton of things about attitude. First thing it taught me was a rather, again, obvious one. The first time you hold your first child, at least it did this for me, kind of made me start thinking about that it's all about me concept. Because after you have a child, it's never about you ever again. Did you ever notice that? They become everything. Now imagine the add-on. Again, I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but let's be brutally honest. When you don't have any arms, the thoughts that go through your head about how you're going to raise a child change a little bit. You know, did you think about how you were going to hold your child? Did you think about how you were going to carry them? How you were going to do the things that many people take for granted? Even a little thing, just one, for example, throwing a ball in a backyard. Those are the things that enter your brain. And that's not always the best idea to have when you've just had a brand new baby. But then there was one more. August 23rd, 1985 was actually the first time that I ever considered how my mother and father must have felt the first time they held me. They called us the thalidomide victims. I hate that expression, by the way. But I'm not sure that's accurate. What about the moms? What about our dads? Look, I'm going to say a lot of things today that might seem a bit brutally honest. I mean no offense today. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm going to generalize. But is this not a correct assumption? Nobody starts out building or growing or having a family hoping they would have a child like me. Correct? So what do we do when that occurs? What happens when that takes place? Well, see, that's my story. I mean, my story is kind of about me, but my story is not about me. My story is about everybody that contributed to me that brought me to you today. Does that make sense? Because nobody does this alone. Nobody does this alone. Oh man, I got to tell you about Mom and Dad, because it never even occurred to me how amazing they were. It really didn't until August 23rd, 1985. I knew I was pretty lucky to have them because they were unusual people. Seriously. Mom was 55 years old the first time she held me, and Dad was 53, and I was an orphan. Now, I'm not messing with your heads. Those are simple facts. I became an orphan on day 4 of my life, July 26th, 1960, because doctors advised my birth family, who were young, naive, and totally terrified of my reality, that this would would never ever amount to anything. They did not know what to do. They were simply so concerned, yes, about themselves, yes, but also about me. What is he going to turn out to be? And the doctors, with due respect to medical people in the world, said this: oh, probably nothing. Look what he's starting with. Well, what can we do? Well, the most loving act you can do, folks, is sign these papers. He will become a ward of the government of Saskatchewan, and then he will be looked after. Well, they liked the sound of that. So they signed the papers, and they walked away. Now, that was not an act of lacking courage. That was actually a very courageous act. But I was still an orphan, and I still had nowhere to go. So when these people came along, their names were Hilda and Jack Law, and they took me in, it was a gig, frankly. I'm not trying to take away from the philosophical beauty of this, but it was a gig. They were foster parents. They looked after unwanted children temporarily. That's what they did. They'd already raised their family. Why would they want to start another one? But that's what they did. They looked after these children. They had an empty bedroom. Now that mystifies me. Quite frankly, it really mystifies me. Because my son's now 25. When he moved away from our home when he was 18, my wife and I partied for 11 straight days. Now please don't read anything into this next statement, because again, it is not personal. If you have a 29-year-old living in your basement, you may want to kick their butt out. It's just a thought. Anyway, I remember the idea of my child. Of course, I love my child. But when he moved out, I know we'd done one thing right. We made him